Picture walking through a mist-covered forest, where the air clings thick with the scent of damp earth, and the whisper of ancient secrets rustles in the leaves above. The sun's faint light filters through twisted branches tangled in gray moss, casting long shadows that dance just beyond the corner of your eye. Somewhere deeper in this gloomy woodland, the ash crackles softly from a dying fire, sending tendrils of smoke curling into the cold air. But the forest feels empty. Strange, isn't it? Because it wasn't always this way. Long ago, these woods were alive with whispers, not just of the wind or animals, but of people. Not ordinary people, mind you, but a mysterious folk known as the Ash People. Their name alone sends your imagination swirling. Figures made of smoke and cinder flickering between reality and legend, as transient as the embers they were named after. Yet today, they have vanished. Poof, gone, not a trace. So where did they go? What were they really? And why did they disappear, leaving behind only faint tracks in the stories our ancestors once told by firelight? This should be no surprise. Folklorists have long wondered about the Ash People's curious disappearance. Traced through fragments in 14th century English villages, Scottish highlands, and even stretchings of Viking Scandinavia, these elusive figures appear again and again, but only as shadows. It is said they emerged from the ashes of hearth fires, as if kindled by the soul of the home itself, and with equal ease, they vanished back into smoke when morning came. Imagine the crackling sound of the firewood losing its battle, the slow hiss of cooled embers, and suddenly, a shape rises, a figure shimmering with smoke, as fragile and fleeting as a dream. This might be the strangest thing about the Ash People. They were never quite solid, not in the way you and I are. Their bodies seemed woven from the very breath of fire and the ashen remains of burnt wood, flickering between being and non-being. They were not ghosts, if you think of ghosts as spirits of the dead, nor were they demons or fairies as the old tales also describe. Instead, they occupied a liminal space, betwixt and between, neither fully human nor purely elemental. This ethereal nature unsettled the minds of medieval villagers who both feared and revered the Ash People. To them, these luminous silhouettes were not just creepy apparitions. They were symbolic guardians, ancient therapists shrouded in smoke, performing rituals older than recorded time. The Ash People represented transformation, destruction, and renewal, perhaps because ashes themselves embody this paradox. From the remnants of burning comes fertility, warmth, and rebirth, seedbeds for the next cycle of life. The old wives of Devon and Cornwall whispered that the Ash People tended hearths to protect families from ill fortune, illnesses, and malevolent spirits. Like ancient therapy sessions, encounters with them were said to purge inner turmoil, mending rifts within households or guiding lost souls back to their purpose. The flicker of their forms soothed anxieties in ways no human could articulate, healing wounds silent to the tongue but heavy on the heart. One full story collected by folklorist Catharine Briggs in the early 20th century recounts the tale of Thomas of Asheville, a humble woodsman haunted by grief after losing his wife to the plague. One cold evening by the fire, Thomas noticed a faint gray figure forming from the ashes piled in the hearth. The ash person stepped out, its eyes like embers glowing softly. "Why do you grieve so deeply?" it asked in a voice like the crackle of dry leaves. "My heart is broken," Thomas replied, "and I fear I will never find joy again." The ash person nodded, and with a flick of their smoky hand, they beckoned Thomas to follow, not into the forest, but into a swirling dance of embers and shadows. Through this dance, Thomas relived memories not only of sorrow, but also of laughter, hope, and love. The bittersweet tapestry of a life lived fully. When dawn painted the skies pink, the ash person vanished, leaving Thomas with a new sense of peace and a fire rekindled in his soul. This story reveals more than a ghostly encounter. It speaks to the ancient understanding that healing does not erase pain, but sits with it, like the gentle warmth of ashes cooling on cold hands. But there's more to this story, for the Ash People were also nature's version of security cameras, alerting residents to threats both tangible and unseen. In many rural communities, the crackling of the hearth was the pulse of the home's safety. A hearth fire dying prematurely signaled misfortune. The Ash People's presence was a reassurance that all was well, or a warning when danger approached. Scandinavian sagas from the 10th century describe these ash spirits as both protectors and tricksters, capable of guiding hunters back to their path or misleading them into wild, unholy places if disrespect was shown to the forest's sacred fires. They were the original environmental activists in a way, embodying the intimate relationship between humans, fire, and forest. To offend the fire, and thus the Ash People, was to doom the village to cold nights, famine, or disease. Their whispers carried reminders that nature demanded respect and humility, a message lost to more modern pursuits and technologies. Imagine the weight of this understanding settling on you as you sit beside your electronic screens and artificial lights. How distant it feels from a time when smoke meant more than pollution. It was the breath of the Earth's spirit itself. Yet beneath this behavior lay deeper social currents. The Ash People's stories tell us something else, that in the oldie world, community was not just a concept, but a living, breathing entity woven from rituals binding people to one another and the land. The figure of the Ash Person functioned as medieval social workers, mediating conflict, guiding rites of passage, and ensuring communal well-being. Folklorist Ronald Hutton argues that these folklore beings reveal ancient social contracts, reminders that maintaining social harmony was a sacred duty, intertwined with cosmic order. Through their smoky limbs, these beings embodied the fragile balance of human connections, requiring constant tending, just like fire. Yet as centuries marched on, and hearth fires gave way to smoky chimneys, and eventually to central heating, the Ash People began to fade from collective memory. The mechanization and urbanization of life stripped away the context that had nurtured their presence. Where once a flickering hearth was the nucleus of daily life, now artificial glow replaced natural fire's warmth, emptying the old narratives of their power. We replaced the Ash People with sterile alarm systems and anonymous impersonal institutions. Whereas once families gathered, listening for the quiet messages in the fire's murmurs, we now binge-watch shows about dystopian worlds, feeling ever more disconnected despite constant connection. In a way, the Ash People's vanishing marks the loss of an ancient wisdom, a relationship with mystery, with transformation, and with the warmth of shared vulnerability. And yet, if you close your eyes and listen very closely, you might still hear the faint crackle of forgotten embers echoing in the spaces between modern noise. What these tales really reveal is a world where the intangible, that flicker of smoke, that half-glimpsed figure, held profound meaning. They challenge us to reconsider what it means to be protective, to heal, to belong. Though the Ash People vanished, their spirit lingers in our need to find light in darkness, to feel soothed by the warmth of connection. So, as we move forward, let us ask ourselves, can we reclaim some of that ancient mystery? Can we transform the coldness of modern life into an ember that glows with resilient human spirit? The forest remains, alive and waiting, its shadows thick with legacy. Somewhere just beyond sight, the Ash People may still breathe, in stories, in dreams, in the smoke rising from the hearths we've yet to rediscover. And with each spark, we inch closer to understanding not just who they were, but who we once were, and might still become. But the Ash People were more than just flickering shadows or ephemeral protectors of the hearth. They embodied an ancient alchemy of life and death, loss and renewal, that we struggle to grasp fully in our modern age. Their vanishing was not mere disappearance, but a fading of vital wisdom, a parting from a world where the invisible was deeply felt and its lessons sincerely heeded. To understand them better, we must return once more to the old tales and listen carefully, as if the ashes themselves still whispered. One of the most fascinating traits of the Ash People was their mutable, transient form. This might be the strangest thing about them. Never fixed or stable, never fully graspable. Folklorists like Catharine Briggs and Rudolf Simek note that the Ash People often appeared like smoldering figures, sometimes a faint resemblance of human shape, sometimes no more than a curling tendril of smoke. Medieval chroniclers described them as beings caught between existence and non-existence, ephemeral guardians who could vanish as easily as they appeared. In some English Midlands villages, it was believed that the Ash People could pass through walls and trees as if they were made of mist. In others, they were said to dissolve at the break of day, a tender reminder that their true realm was the liminal moment of firelight fading to shadow. This visual fragility belied their profound symbolic strength. Ash, after all, is the residue of fire's devastation and its promise. From the scorched remains grows fertility. The forest floor, once burned, blossoms anew. The Ash people represented this cyclical dance, a sacred paradox of destruction birthing creation. To the oldie world, they were living metaphors for transformation, forces of renewal cloaked in the guise of endings. Their presence in the hearth was no accident. The hearth fire itself symbolized home, family, and survival. In 15th century northern England, villagers believed that tending the hearth was as much caretaking of the Ash people as it was of the flame. Neglect the fire, and you might anger these guardians, bringing misfortune upon your kin. This relationship mirrors what we might today call emotional caretaking, the tending of inner fires that warm and sustain us. But the Ash people's role went beyond symbolism or healing. As nature's version of security cameras, they were subtle sentinels of safety and warning. Think about it. In a time before televisions or radios, a fire's crackling was one of the few sounds connecting a household to the outside world. A fire dying too quickly could mean unexpected rain, lurking predators, or intruders. Ash people's sightings or sensations were interpreted as signs, omens to heed or reassurances to trust. A chilling Scandinavian legend from the 11th century recounts hunters lost in dense woods who were guided back to safety by smoky figures whose forms melted into the night. But disrespect the forest or your fire, and these beings might lead you astray into dark and unholy territories. The price of human hubris toward nature's delicate balance. This suggests the Ash people were early environmental activists of a sort, teaching respect for natural elements and boundaries, at a time when humans lived hand in hand with the wilderness. Their existence enforced a sacred contract between mankind and Earth, a warning that carelessness released chaos, and that every ember touched bore consequence. The Old Norse sagas, studied extensively by folklorist John H. Neffel Adelsteinson, emphasize such mutual respect, showing spirits like the Ash people acting as cosmic enforcers of this ancient green ethic. They teach us, in poetic form, that ignoring the fragility of our environments could unravel not only our immediate safety, but the very fabric of society itself. This reveals something deeper about the Ash people. They were, in many ways, medieval social workers taking the form of smoke and ash. Their rituals, encounters, and interventions were not random. They served to maintain social harmony and emotional well-being. Medieval communities, often isolated, understood that survival depended on cooperation and empathy as much as on skill or strength. The Ash people's spectral presence healed rifts, steered behavior, and mediated conflicts. Their folklore stories describe how they soothed feuding families by appearing at night and whispering forgotten truths, bringing to light unspoken pains and forgotten love. Ronald Hutton, a leading authority on British folklore, argues these spirits symbolize ancient social contracts binding people together with unwritten codes of respect, balance, and care. One illustrative tale from Cornwall, documented by folklorist Sabine Baringgood in the 19th century, recounts a village torn by a bitter land dispute. One night, as tempers flared and hope waned, the Ash people appeared dancing softly atop the ash pile by a dying hearth, their smoky forms weaving gentle patterns. The family patriarch, gripped by anger, heard a voice as soft as ash blowing on the wind. Only through shared flame can light endure. Moved by this visitation, tempers cooled and a new agreement was forged. To the villagers, it was proof these beings were not just spectral figures, but embodiments of a societal glue, reminding them of their interconnectedness and fragile peace. Yet beneath this behavior lay a cruel irony. As the centuries advanced, the hearth's centrality lessened. The Industrial Revolution and mechanization detached families from the fireside, pushing life indoors under cold gaslights and later electric bulbs. The ash hearths turned to cold ornament, and the ancient stories lost their living roots. Central heating and urban living severed the intimate connection between flame and community, between smoke and spirit. The Ash people, whose very nature was defined by fire's glow, faded into myth and superstition, diminished by modernity's relentless advance. Where once a hearth crackled and invited shared stories and warmth, now screens glow with impersonal luminosity, and ancient wisdom is drowned in digital noise. The loss of the Ash people is more than the disappearance of a magical folk story. It symbolizes the unraveling of a world where humans were deeply entwined with mystery, transformation, and communal responsibility. Modern life often feels colder, more fractured, distant from the sources of comfort and connection that the Ash people embodied. Like ancient therapy sessions, their presence soothed heartache and healed emotional fractures that words often fail to reach. Their vanishing mirrors are loss of communal rituals, where darkness was held gently rather than feared outright, and where wounds were worked through in the warmth of shared firelight. But there's more to this story, because the Ash people have not entirely disappeared. Their essence survives in the quiet spaces between modern noise, in the flicker of candlelight, the tendrils of smoke curling from campfires, and the lingering warmth after embers have died. They live in our dreams and stories, waiting for those who will once again listen for their messages. The Ash people remind us that healing and protection still come from the intangible, the transient. They challenge us to reclaim the mystery that modern life has edged out. The understanding that transformation requires fire, that endings breed beginnings, and that connection is forged in vulnerability. Imagine for a moment sitting by a crackling fire under a cloudy night sky, feeling the ash fall softly onto your lap, sensing that the smoke carries ancient whispers meant just for you. The Ash people invite us to step back into that wonder and to remember that we are part of a larger cycle of loss, renewal, and belonging. Perhaps they urge, we can kindle again those embers of attentive care, social responsibility, and emotional healing that sustained centuries of lives before ours. Maybe the ancient hearth spirit longs not to be forgotten, but to guide us back to a path where the warmth of firelight matches the warmth of community. Consider this final story, collected from the Highlands of Scotland by folklorist John Francis Campbell in the 19th century. A grieving mother, bereft after losing her child to fever, sat silently by her hearth, the ashes cold. Suddenly, from the gray cinders rose a figure, gentle and shifting, whose eyes held both sorrow and light. "Why do you carry such a heavy heart?" the ash person asked softly. The mother replied, "Because my world is broken and no fire remains within me." The ash person reached toward her, and slowly the embers stirred, glowing faintly. "From the ashes, new life will grow," it said before vanishing with the morning mist. Inspired by this encounter, the mother found courage to care for her surviving children and rebuild her life. The tale tells us something universal. Grief is not erased but transformed, carrying the seed of resilience. As we close this journey through the misty woods of forgotten folklore, remember this. The vanishing of the Ash people is not just about lost stories, but about lost ways of being. These beings teach us that we once lived closer to mystery, when the world still held secrets worth protecting. They remind us that fire and ash are not only physical phenomena, but metaphors for human experience, a dance of loss and renewal, sorrow and hope. Their stories whisper of a past where human connection, nature's rhythms, and the sacredness of transformation were inseparable. So, what are the ashes in your life? What fires have you tended or allowed to die? The Ash people invite you to listen, not just to their ancient stories, but to the quiet embers within your own heart. In a world rushing toward cold efficiency, they call us back to warmth. The warmth of shared stories, healing presence, and the tender attention required to rebuild what has been lost. Let us honor their memory not merely as myth, but as a living challenge to reclaim mystery, connection, and the sacred cycles that bind us all. For in tending the ashes, we kindle the fire that keeps the human spirit alive. The forest waits still, shrouded in mist and memory, its shadows rich with the unspoken. Stories of the Ash people, waiting for the next listener, the next firekeeper, to breathe life once more into these ancient, flickering guardians of flame and ash.